Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Royal Blue podcast. This is take 2 after having a few audio issues. Let us know in the comments if the audio is okay, because we did have a few audio issues to start off the podcast then. Thanks for letting us know. As I'm sure you are aware, I have to host as well as produce at the same time, so I am multitasking. I do my best. I do try to do my best anyway, but we'll carry on. As I mentioned, let us know in the comments if the audio is fine, and we will restart the podcast again. Ian Burgess has said it's working now, all good now, so we are good. Okay, nice. We will start. We'll start again.
Hi.
For the purpose of the audio podcast for the guys and girls who listen on the audio platform. So here we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Royal Blue podcast. I'm Ian Croll. It is the Monday show. We are back after a few days off, and we are live. So get your comments in on the stream. We are joined by Gav Buckland and Joe Thomas. First off, Joe, how are things? All good? I've just asked you. I know you're good, Joe, but we'll ask you again.
Yeah, very good. Cheers. Thanks, Ian.
Good, all good. Gav, rocking the shorts again?
Again, the same as like 5 minutes ago, I believe.
You haven't had a costume change or anything?
No. We should have a clapperboard during our podcast, a take 2, and it's a wrap and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, the agenda. Everton have a few injury concerns, so we are going to discuss that ahead of at the start of the Premier League season, as well as the future of Dominic Calvert-Lewin, the dilemma that Everton currently face with regards to Everton's main number one striker, as well as some transfer news and the latest on Calvin Phillips and a few others as well. Joe, Let's start with you. I was away at the weekend, so I didn't see too much of the Preston game. As mentioned just a few minutes ago, there was concerns after the Coventry game, getting beat against the lower league opposition, that there was, a few concerns with regards to Everton's form. But I think you have been proven right that it is all just about fitness and making sure players are fit for the start of the season. So how was it, first of all?
Yeah, it was good and largely reassuring. I think that having gone through the whole of pre-season saying this is about fitness, we can't read too much into results, it would be a little bit churlish for me to now go, they've gone and smashed Preston and everything's fine. But it was a positive experience, I think. They played pretty well. They attacked with a decent bit of intent. All 5 summer signers were involved. All had positive experience. I sat a few rows behind Kevin Fowler. I know he took a lot of heart from that. And it did generally feel like things were starting to come together a little bit more, and perhaps more than we've seen in the other pre-season friendlies. I was there at Coventry last week, and that wasn't a particularly pleasant experience. That was a long drive down there, a pretty poor showing, and then a long drive back off the back of a bad performance as well. And I spoke to Dyche after that, and in fairness to Dyche, on the touchline at Coventry, he was saying that whilst this is fitness, not displays, etc., he was disappointed with his players. You mentioned injuries there. There are a few squad players that perhaps getting a bit more of an opportunity than they would perhaps have expected at this stage of pre-season. At Coventry, he was disappointed that they hadn't done more to make a case for themselves, that they should be in and around the thinking when Brighton come knocking in a fortnight time. Well, he got the answers, the responses that he wanted to at Deepdale the other day. It was a good performance. I think we can take some heart from it. We don't read too much into it, but there were a few positive things to take away from that, and I'm taking heart from that, I think.
Gav, do you read too much into pre-season results, or do you agree with Joe? Is it just all about getting the minutes for the players on the pitch and obviously avoiding injury as well?
Yeah, I like to see a few wins rather than a few defeats. Yeah. To be fair, I get all the injury, the fitness stuff. I think it's more to me. If you have 5 or 6 games that you can see progress from the first pre-season game to the last pre-season game in terms of fitness, and dare I say, if you start off with a couple of defeats, it always ends. If you end up with a couple of wins, we got a win yesterday. So to me, it's a little bit more than just fitness. Sometimes, I've seen the previous 7 managers say these defeats can, be a warning sign. I don't think that's the case this time. That's just generally speaking. But I'm not really being too concerned about about it so far, and it was good to get a win on and a good performance, I believe, on Saturday.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I didn't see much of it, Joe. So it was nice to. I saw the goals obviously after the fact, but it was nice to see that Everton had got up and running pre-season. There was a few standouts. I mean, debuts for O'Brien, Lindstrom, fantastic free kick from Lindstrom. Does that bode well for, dead ball? Is he going to be a dead ball specialist for us, you think?
Well, I think he'll help. I mean, it was quite interesting. I spoke to James Garner after Salford when he scored a direct free kick, and he said he was hoping that might be a sign for the other players to back off when those opportunities come. 20 yards from goal, 25 yards from goal, and I think he's just. He wasn't involved on Saturday, and I think he probably would have winced when he saw what happened, because with Lindstrom's, I mean, his first attacking free kick for the Blues, and I mean, it looked like it was going in from the moment that he hit it. It was a really sweet strike, and I know he was pleased with it and hopes to get plenty of opportunities from those positions in this coming season. You know what, I think my biggest takeaways were probably away from the headlines. It's easy to focus on the goals, but it was probably the general play that I was most satisfied with. Firstly, there was a bit of a new look attacking quartet that they got out the other day, and that was Dominic Calvert-Lewin as the focal point. We expect that. Dwight McNeil on the left of the free attacking midfields behind him, we expect that as well. But it was Jack Harrison at number 10 and Jesper Lindstrom on the right. I know we've had this debate a lot over the course of last season, but last season I advocated for it, and I'll do the same again this year. I do think Harrison's a more natural option to be in that role behind the main striker than I think.
Did he look more comfortable in that role?
Dwight McNeil is. I think he did. I think he played that a lot more last season. I think he generally looked comfortable there last season as well. I do think he is a better answer than, say, Dwight McNeil. But I also think and kind of hope that it's actually a question that doesn't need to be asked this season, because I actually think that the most natural successor to that position is Iliman Ndiaye. So hopefully he can come in and do that, and it can be Harrison, Lindstrom, and McNeil sharing the duties out wide. But Dyche does like Harrison as a number 10. He does think he can do it, and I thought he played quite well there the other day. But what I really liked was the way in which they operated as a four, and there were a few positive signs there. And I think that we know that we see a lot of direct football from Everton under Sean Dyche. And, don't get me wrong, I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. But we saw a lot more ball on the ground against Preston. Now, partly that's going to be because João Virginia's in goal, and I don't think his range, his distribution is as expansive as Jordan Pickford's. So you're not going to see those big long balls into the channels. But what I did see was Harrison and Lindstrom in particular looked very comfortable at taking the ball to their feet with their back to goal and a defender on them 30, 40 yards from goal. And it opened up some passing channels for the likes of James Tarkowski and Michael Keane. They kept doing it, hitting the feet of the attacking midfielders. And it was just something we didn't see at all last season. And I think it's something that Dyche is toying with this season, and something that he might like to try and do, depending on how the seasons progress and how he can get this Everton side to evolve. And I think that there were two good takeaways from that. Firstly is, one, it shows a little bit more diversity in how Everton are going to attack, and I think they need that. Secondly, one thing that was really telling, and again, we can't read too much into this, I thought it was particularly telling in relation to Lindstrom. Just take away everything else about their performances. They win a lot by playing that way. They win a lot of free kicks between 25 and 40 yards from the opposition goal. And we know that Everton are one of the most effective attacking set-piece units there are in the Premier League. That's only going to get even stronger when you've got Jake O'Brien as another option, all 6'5" of him. And it's a way in which Everton can play to their advantages. I spoke to Lindstrom after the game. Really lovely. He came across really well. Really excited to be a Blue. And we were talking about that. And he was saying about how they see winning those free kicks in attacking areas in the opposition half as a more effective and efficient route to goal, because there's a lot less pressure on you when you're trying to deliver an effective ball into the box. When you're doing it from a dead ball position, you haven't got the pressure of an opposition player on you than there is if you're trying to do that when everything's moving in and around you from open play. So I liked that, and the goal. It was good for Dominic Calvert-Lewin to get up and running, because he's had a difficult pre-season. He's missed some chances, and he's missed some chances quite poorly as well, if that is such a thing. I know that his goal's from the spot, and there'll be a lot of people who weren't watching that will say, oh, it's only from 12 yards. He's not really up and running. But the goal came from a move that started, that heavily involved Harrison and McNeil playing the ball on the floor and ended up at the feet of Dominic Calvert-Lewin, bursting into the box and then drawing the foul for the penalty. And again, that was just another sign of improvement as to how he was interacting with the players around him, how Everton were attacking as a unit, and I took positives from that as well. So I think that you can look at the goals and you can look at the scoreline, and I say you can't read too much into it, but I did come away from it with a positive feeling. How all that transposes itself against Premier League opposition and even Serie A opposition, which we'll see with Roma on Saturday. We'll have to wait and see. Obviously, they are going to be better sides, but having been willing to be so concerned after Coventry, it's only fair that in Preston you have another top half Championship side that when things work for them, they can push for the playoffs in that division. And Everton, they're obviously further along in their pre-season. Their season starts this Friday, so that was their last game. And Everton were very comfortable against them, and that's a positive.
Joe just mentioned there, Gav, obviously how well we do at set pieces. Were we the top, if not one of the top, at scoring set pieces last season?
We were one of the top.
I'm just thinking, we can't just rely on set pieces all the time. We're going to have to adapt our game. And I feel like from the players that we're bringing in, I feel like that's what Dyche and Thelwell are looking at doing. Do you feel like we're potentially going to become more of a counter-attacking unit, or how would you see that with the players that he's brought in?
I think more creative.
Yeah.
I think in the final third, I would say is what I take from the the transfer business thus far. And Lundstram, as you say, I do like that. Harrison as a 10. I think his low centre of gravity, the fact he's more naturally two-footed than quite a few of the other players, lends itself to playing that number 10 role, and he did so hugely effectively against Newcastle home last season, and probably our best performance of the campaign. So I see more creativity in the final third is what we want, and what Dyche wants, and that's been reflected in the signs. But at the same time, we could increase our goal threat from set pieces. It was a nice little 1-2 headed 1-2, that wasn't it, for the goal? You don't see that very often.
That's it. I say Calvert-Lewin was just generally much more involved, and there were positives. I mean, just in relation to your question, I mean, they were a very counter-attacking side last season, and I think they'll remain that this season. But there are different ways in which you can counter-attack. Last season, it was very much a case of the ball's in Pickford's hands. Let's lump it up to Dominic Calvert-Lewin, who can do that job. And then he tries to, you try and bring the rest of the side up with you. I think they might be able to move forward more effectively as a unit this season. One thing that was notable is, and I don't know, this might not have been on purpose. This might have just been because it was pre-season, less pressure, and also because of new faces and players around it. But the attacking four were pushed much higher up the pitch to put the players around, to get in and around Dominic Calvert-Lewin than we perhaps saw a lot of last season, when it often felt like the midfield, including the wingers, collapsed onto the defence. It was notable how much further forward Lundstram and McNeil were during the course of of this game. So I think that they'll remain a counter-attacking side, but they might be a team that can counter-attack on the ground as well as going forward, which I think is a good move.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Go on. Sorry,
I was going to say, I think what you're saying there, a bit more pace.
Yeah, I just think, I don't disagree with Joe that we have been a counter-attacking side in the past. I just think the final outcome of those counter-attacks has never really resulted in a goal, which is probably where you've just
a bit more pace. We've spoken about that, haven't we, over the last
but creativity
last month or so.
As well.
Oh, yeah, and I'm hugely encouraged by our recruitment in that regard over the summer. Completely different to what I was expecting, because I said at the start of the summer that I wanted to see as a low-risk recruitment drive, which means that we'll stay in the Premier League, and then we can rebuild once you go to Bramley Moor with that move secured and we're still in the Premier League. But it's happened sort of 12 months before I was expecting. I was just thought we'd just do the same as previous years. A couple of loans, a couple of players coming in, you know what they're like. The established performers, like Ashley Young, that type of stuff, which we've done in the past. But it's been, encouragingly for me, completely different to that. And I think I said a while ago, didn't I, on the pod, the take from that is this is not a management team or a club that actually thinks they're going to be anywhere near a relegation battle next season. This is a manager who wants to kick on from what the baseline that we set last year, and that's been reflected in the people that we bought, and because they're young and relatively untried, okay, there's a risk with that, but it also means that they're relatively cheap, and you can get good deals and not necessarily hit the wage bill. Got players coming in on 120 grand a week, which we've had lots of times in the past. Yeah. So you can get two youngish, very talented, players with potential for one established player, can't you, really? And I've been really encouraged about it, and there may be scope possibly to bring one or two others in, but we'll see. But yeah, really good, and as I say, I expect slightly different from us next year, less attritional and a bit more creativity in the final third.
I guess, Joe, just to finish off on this point, we've always seemed to struggle, didn't we, against the lower, the lesser teams or the weaker teams, whatever you want to call it. If you look at the likes of Luton, there's a couple of others as well, I can't think off the top of my head, but we just really did struggle to break those teams down, because they would sit in, we would get frustrated, the crowd would get frustrated, and then they would inevitably break away, or they'd get a set piece, a free kick, a corner, or whatever, and they'd end up winning the game. And I mean, twice it happened, Luton once in the cup, once in the league as well. So I guess our best performances, you probably could say, came against the teams who would come at you.
Yeah,
as well.
That was a feature of last season. Everton did worse the more possession that they had. So yeah, I think there will be a bit of a change in approach this summer. I don't think it'll be a drastic one. Like I say, I think it'll still be one where Everton look to draw sides onto them and then do everything that they can to protect the box. Be willing to concede space out wide so that people can put the balls into the box. But like we've seen for so long, under Dyche, Everton are very effective at defending those situations. The only time it kind of feels a little bit nervy, and I get a little bit frustrated watching this last season. I don't think this is going to change, because I think it is deliberate. Is quite often you saw sides cause Everton problems from corners by taking them short, because Everton didn't have players in and around the edge of the area marking those. But there weren't too many that hurt Everton through that. I think Arsenal did. Villa nearly did, but Moreno's goal was ruled offside, wasn't it? Not offside, there was a foul in the build-up, I think, wasn't it? But other than that, I think we'll see a lot of the same, but hopefully they'll be able to attack with a bit more intent. And there's definitely going to be a little bit more guile there, I think. Ndiaye is a savvy, clever player. Lindstrom has a lot of pace, likes to cut inside. Harrison, perhaps in the middle, might be a little bit more effective, because as a wide player, he's not the type of player that is going to burst past a fullback. He's not the type of player who's going to trick his way past a fullback. But if you have him in the centre, he's the type of person that can probably drop a little bit deeper and play a through ball. So, I'm kind of looking for, I think what we might have a little bit more of this season is, going forward, is that pace and that guile, so that when Everton counter-attack, you might see, rather than the ball lumped up to Dominic Calvert-Lewin in the air and him fighting a centre-back, it might be thrown out or kicked out to Lindstrom out wide on one side to carry it, and there might be 3 or 4 bursting forward rather than 1 or 2, rather than Calvert-Lewin, and hope the Corey gets up there as quickly as possible. What I would like to, because I can't really remember many occasions at all last season when this happens, what I'm hoping is that with the personnel that they've signed, they've basically got someone that, you saw it a few times last season, it would always tend to break down, but when you are counter-attacking, you've got a 3-on-3, someone who can actually play the cute ball to carry on the attack going forward. Yeah. This is hopefully a side that isn't just counter-attacking in the hope that it can win a free kick 30 yards from goal. Yeah. It's a side that can actually cause problems from open play. So, and you're right, some of those lesser sides, Everton did struggle against last season. I mean, Luton in the league, both goals came from set pieces. It wasn't necessarily from breakaway or anything like that, but it just will give opposition teams more to think about, and the more their minds are scattered in how best to defend against Everton, the more chances there will be to expose them as they split their attentions in different directions. So, I think it's fair to say you can see a strategy, and it's a strategy that makes sense. We have to wait and see whether or not it's going to work, and we can't say a 3-0 win at Preston 2 weeks before the end of pre-season is going to be proof that it's going to have Everton, in the top half and playing attacking football and everyone's buzzing. But it's probably the direction of travel that was necessary. I think it's probably one that we all agree is the right move, and something that we'd like to see. And I think that there probably deserves to be a degree of credit for at least embarking on that mission. So hopefully, I certainly think we'll be in for a bit more of an entertaining year this year. Whether that's an entertaining year and it means that it's 3 each rather than 0-0 because we're trading blows in a different kind of way, we'll have to wait and see. But hopefully Goodison in its final year of football will get a little bit more entertainment from some of those games.
Are you going to be able to cope with that, Gav, if that is the case? Goals galore?
Hopefully scored by us. Yeah, I think so. But remember that managers don't change the spots, and for all the talk and the positive talk we're saying about more creativity and guile in the final third, managers all managers have a certain way of playing, and Dyche is not going to change his way of playing. He'll tinker around with it, but we're not going to start playing like Guardiola the thing. But we there's scope there within the structure that he likes a team defending the V and all that type of business for us to be show a bit more flair in the final third. We also need within that for the two central midfielders to move the ball on a lot more quicker than what we have done. We tend to
slow it down,
don't we? A little bit more pace of playing the ball through the middle will also assist us. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. The other caveat being is we're talking about players like Ilman Endai, players like that. He's played one Premier League game, so the relatively unproven Premier League players here. So that can work for you to work against it. We're hoping that it'll work for us and that they're improving and they have a high ceiling at Premier League level, and that goes to 4 or 5 of the players that we bought in the summer. So we just have to caveat that, but I'm really looking forward to it. It's something new which we've not had for a while, and if you go back to the previous season, our recruitment's been over the last 2 summers. It's been decent, hasn't it, in terms of the players they brought in and the players they got rid of. And I got my abacus out. I don't want to bore everybody here, but I will. Got my abacus out last week, and they talk about squad cost. We've got rid of players off the right wage bill that were very expensive. Yeah. Dele Alli, Gomez 100 and odd grand a week, but you also get rid of their transfer fees and stuff like that. So we're about £10 million ahead this year compared to last year on the cost of the squad. Even though people said, well, why have Everton buying all these players when you got PSR issues? Because we've got rid of a lot of players, either because contracts have ended or we sold a few at the end of last year, who were on big money and big transfer fees. So we've got, I think, a more creative, promising squad, and it's cheaper than what it was 12 months ago. And I think that's showing a bit more cleverer way of operating by Dyche and Thelwell. That's what we want to see, isn't it, ultimately?
Definitely, without a doubt. Okay, before we move on to injuries, let's just again say hello to everyone in who's watching on the stream and who's commenting and sticking with us through our audio issues. We are we're live, and we are live and kicking, I think, is probably the phrase to use. So get your questions in, get your opinions in, and we'll read them out at the end. In our quick fire section of the podcast. Okay, Joe, before we come on to actual injury updates, just want to come to Gav first and just say, do you think, for all the positives that you've just spoke about then, is the squad size and squad depth obviously going to be an issue? Come those winter months, come January, when obviously the usual, it's a cliche, but injuries, suspensions start, picking up. Is that a cause for concern?
Depends where on the pitch those are.
Yeah.
Really, I think Dyche may have spoken about this. Joe will probably pick up on it. We're probably in midfield the short, so that's an area where we can't afford to lose players, and our lack of cover at full-back is also an issue. The suspicion is though that we've got enough on either side just to muddle through,
fill a hole
this year. So those are the 2 areas that I think if we did lose 1 or 2 players, we'd struggle. We've got enough central defensively, probably at the moment. And the other issue for us is, again, we'll talk about it later on in the pod, is striking. But but I think that's always going to be the case. The way we are, as much as I'm saying, we've made savings compared to last year, is we still got PSR issues. So perhaps we can't. Not going to go out and possibly get 2, 3, or 4 more players to plug all them gaps.
No,
but we'll just have to see. But I do think we're in a stronger position than what we were last year, notwithstanding those gaps, I think.
Joe, then you've written a piece this morning regarding injuries. Little bit of a concern. Obviously, there's a couple of players who carrying knocks, or basically, I think, facing a race against time. I think, as you put it, to be available for the first game, and Branthwaite is definitely one of them. Obviously, Mykolenko played. Concern for his fitness, but he did play against Preston. James Garner, injury concern over that. But do you want to just quickly go through some of the players that we got major concerns on?
Well, I'll start with the good news, because there was some good news on this front from Preston. So James Tarkowski started and played 45 minutes. So he's got over his glute injury, and that's the first minutes he's had a pre-season. So that's positive. Vitaly Mykolenko played the first half as well. He came off injured in the final game for the Euros against Ukraine. I think, as Gav alluded to a little bit just a minute ago, that I think he is one of a number of players that are on a bit of a knife edge in terms of are they in danger of dropping into the injury-prone category. He's picked up 3 injuries in 3 months, so hopefully he's back now and he'll have a long, run of fitness. But there are a few players that are a little bit like that. But he came back, so that was very good. And Idrissa Gueye was back as well, so that was also positive. He'd had a calf issue that ruled him out of a couple of games, and they look so much better when he's there. And Iliman Ndiaye was involved in the second half as well. He had a bit of a back issue, which kept him out of Salford. He then played against Coventry, but then came off, so I wasn't sure what the situation with that was, but he played again, so hopefully that's okay. And Jesper Lindstrom had a few little niggles when he came over from the start of his pre-season with Napoli, and he obviously overcame them, and he had a good run in as well. So they were all the positive ones, and there are a fair few of them, so that's good. There are a few that we're not entirely sure about, a few knocks that I'm not sure the extent of the severity of them, but Seamus Coleman had a knee injury, so that's being assessed. I don't know how bad it is. I think it's probably important at the outset to say that this is a unit of the fitness staff. I'm just writing a piece on this at the moment at Everton, place a lot of trust on the players, and they're very keen to create an environment where players come to them with very minor issues. So even if it's just a twinge or just the most minor thing, come to them, because then they can look at it properly early. So I think this is why you see a lot of absences in pre-season. A lot of it is precautionary. And Dyche said of Garner, and he said of Decore, and he said of Coleman, who were all absent against Preston, that they were precautionary. That doesn't mean to say that they're not going to be issues, but they're looking at them at a very earliest sign to try and get on top of them. So it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be out for a long time. Coleman a little bit concerned about, just because for those who are following the Coventry coverage, he got caught late 3 times in the first half against Coventry. Ashley Young played right back the other day and got caught a few times. I don't know if teams are just over exuberant, or if it's something that they're targeting Everton's fullbacks. I don't know, but he got caught. But it was notable. The first 45 minutes, he got caught a few times. There's one bit where he was down on the turf for a while and looked in pain after he got caught, and we see that he was hurt, rubbing his knee, and he came off a little later in the game after that. He did play for a fair bit longer. But I'm wondering if that's something that, an impact injury that he's picked up against Coventry, and I'd be interested to see what that, 'cause obviously he has had I'm not sure if it's the same knee that he did against Leicester the season before last, but knees have been a problem for him in the past. Garner was a calf issue. I think I said that. That's a muscle injury that they're assessing at the moment. Decore is a hamstring injury that they're assessing. So these are the players that we're just kind of not sure how much they're creaking. And I think that a big chunk of the answer to the question that you just posed to Gav about the squad and how it does in the, when the darker nights come and the suspensions mount and the weather gets worse and injuries stack up, is I think this Everton squad is better than last season's, and I think there's a little bit more giving it as it currently stands. But I also think that we need to be slightly wary that there are a few players that might be a little bit more fragile. And I think one of the areas for the concern would just be, obviously I mentioned Mikalenko there. Hopefully he's fine now. Hopefully it's just been a bit. Hopefully it's just he had that injury in the derby, came off at half time, and then Ukraine just wanted him back a little bit too soon. And
played a lot of football, hasn't he?
So hopefully it's just that was all just a symptom of that, and now he's through it, and he'll get a bit. He's had a bit of time at his break over the summer. But obviously he's had a few injuries. Hopefully he can get over them now and have a good season, because he had a very good season last season. But then my concern is, and this is probably my main area of concern in the squad, is just that centre midfield. James Garner isn't injury prone, and wait and see how serious that is. Hopefully it isn't very serious. We know Dyche likes him a lot, and he's probably starting alongside Idrissa Gueye, maybe in the first choice centre midfield. But you look at Decore and you look at Idrissa Gueye, and it's very difficult to see neither of them. Everton are going to need both of them to have big seasons. Perhaps not starting every game, but play important roles this season. And I think they're part of a clutch of players there that are older anyway, and they're 1 year older now. And Idrissa Gueye has missed time this pre-season with a calf issue. It was a calf issue that he had a few issues with last season and just kept repeating itself. The Decore concern was just it was a precaution. It's minor, but it was over a hamstring. Well, he missed a big chunk of back end of December and January of last season because he did both hamstrings. Say these players are a little bit older and they're getting a little bit more wear and tear, and their resilience to some of these repeated issues might become a problem for Everton if they end up in a situation where they're overworked this season. So, I think really, I know we'll get onto forward line in a minute, but I think the main area for Everton to be concerned about, if they could address it in the remainder of the transfer window, is they probably would want to bring in a central midfielder, just to help share the burden around those players. You've got Timo Robenham. I think he's had a good pre-season so far. Dyche thinks he's had a good pre-season so far, but again, he's one of a handful of players there who has very, very, very limited Premier League exposure. And I spoke to Dyche about this in quite a bit of detail on the side of the pitch against Preston. When we were talking about how positive those new signings had been at Deepdale, he was quite keen to say, look, we're going to have to be patient with them, because doing it here in pre-season game against Preston when the sun's shining and there's no pressure and you've got an early goal and you win in is one thing, but there's going to be a lot of responsibility on these players when the season starts, and most of them haven't had Premier League football, so we do have to wait and see how they adapt to it. For all the excitement and positivity that I think is fair that we've already discussed. And Dye is coming off the back of a bad season in France. Lindstrom is coming off the back of a bad season in Italy. So there are a few players, Robenham won the plaudits and the backing of Gerrard and then Emery quite publicly at Aston Villa, but then didn't break through even when they had injuries in midfield. Jake O'Brien was sold by Palace for £1 million 12 months ago. So I mean, whilst again he's a signing I think we're right to be excited about, there are still question marks over some of these players. So I think where Everton's finances aren't in a position where, unless other things happen with incomings, they can be proactive in the transfer market. They're not going to be going out there and splashing money in perhaps the same way they've done with some of the deals we've seen so far. I think that their approach to the remainder of the transfer window is going to be opportunistic. And I think we know that they like Calvin Phillips. I've just said all the reasons why a centre midfielder would be probably a preferred option if they could bring someone in. And one of the things that Dyche was telling me the other day is how, bearing in mind what I've just said about those new signings and the lack of experience in the Premier League, that their preferred destination for summer signing number 6 is probably someone who's got Premier League experience, someone that they're not also then relying to come in and then adapt very, very quickly to the toughest league in the world. Yeah. So that's where, all those roads kind of point to why Calvin Phillips would make a lot of sense. And I think that the stumbling block over there will be City trying to work out how much money they can get from him, wages, things like that. I think if the terms of the deal came towards them, and I think it's probably a deal that they would do tomorrow, but I think that City probably want to do what they can to get as much money for him, either as a transfer fee or a loan fee or whatever it is, as they can. And obviously, whilst teams are looking for the best deal possible, Everton aren't in a situation when they can knock on a door. Well, they're in a situation they can knock on the door, but they're not in a situation when they can bust it down and go, just sign it, give them to us now. So that would probably be a bit of a wait and see. So Yeah, I think fullback. I think there are legitimate concerns, certainly over the long term, certainly over right back long term. I think there's probably a feeling that they've got enough to muddle through if they need be. It's not ideal. We know how important fullbacks are in the modern game, but between Coleman and Patterson and Ashley Young, they've probably got, and James Garner who can play there, they can probably just about fiddle through on the right, even if things got bad. On the left, Mikalenko, Ashley Young. The signing of Jake O'Brien allows Jared Branthwaite to move over to the left. Yeah. Not ideal. I don't think he wants to play there. I don't think we want to see him play in there, but we saw him do it against Fulham in the Cup. I think he's good on his left foot. He can do it. So I think that some of these moves have been made with that in mind as well. It's centre midfield, I think, is the option. Just to finish off, striker, obviously. Calvert-Lewin's played in minutes and Better's played minutes in every game so far. Youssef Chimiti had a brilliant start to pre-season. He's now got a serious injury, his foot. That's a shame. I think he did it in training on Monday last week. And that looks pretty serious. He's not going to be around for the opening games of the Premier League season. It's definitely not going to be a couple of weeks. Is it going to be months? I'm not sure. But Dyche he's normally very reluctant to kind of go into any detail on these things. But it's going to be more than a couple of weeks with Chimiti. That's a real shame because he looked so good. And then just to bring it back to Branthwaite, he's touch and go for the start of the season. Dyche expects him to be in and around it. Will he quite be ready? I'm not sure. I think it's a groin. I've got to be honest. It's been an injury issue. It's been very, very difficult to get any kind of answers over the course of the summer. But Dyche was on the record the other day as saying that he anticipates him being in the picture for Brighton, but might not quite be ready.
Okay, well, I mean, we'll move on to the forward line, and Gav, Joe's just touched on there. Chimiti, absolutely below that. He's going to miss the start of the season. Obviously, he's not the number one striker, but he has had a really positive pre-season, scoring a couple of goals and getting much needed minutes, and then he goes and gets a foot injury in training. We'll come on to Calvert-Lewin, but scenario, we could have Chimiti out. We could end up selling Calvert-Lewin in the next couple of weeks, and then we could, if we don't replace him, be left with Beto and Mopai as your two strikers. A concern again. Although this is a positive podcast, there is a lot of concern going around, isn't there?
Well, yeah. I mean, I was reading Joe's piece this morning. When you're reading it on your phone, and you've got the tab on the right-hand side that says how far you're down the piece. You've got I've done 4 injuries, and I got like a third of the way down the article. I was thinking, but the real killer one was right at the end when you talk about Chimiti. Yeah. That of all the ones we've spoken about, and Joe's right. I think one thing we've learned about Dyche is he have managed injuries quite well in that, and being on top of them. Calvert-Lewin is a good example of somebody who's been managed well. But when you get right to the bottom, you see about Chimiti, which, to be honest, I wasn't really that aware of the severity of it. I was thinking, it's always a need, because he was at the end of last season and in pre-season showed himself, that he's gone up a notch compared to when he joined. That's what I was talking about, when you buy a young player. And so disappointed from him from a personal angle, because I think he could have kicked on, and hopefully he will still do. But also, when there's question marks over our forward line in general, Calvert-Lewin being at the centre of that, it's only added an extra issue, hasn't it? An extra angle to it. And so I'm gutted about the Chimiti injury for those reasons, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, Joe, this show is called Everton Injury Concerns, which we've touched on, but it's called the Calvert-Lewin dilemma.
Right.
Fantastic that he scored from the spot kick on Saturday, but I just feel like we talked about the situation until we're blue in the face. His future is still up in the air regardless of what happens in the next couple of weeks, isn't it? There was a few moans and groans on social media with regards to Calvert-Lewin. It's like, you need to sign this contract or we need to get rid. I've openly said that in the past that I was happy for him to, run down his contract, and because I just thought he was the steady option for us for this season. But again, if you've listened to previous podcasts, you know my opinion. I've kind of changed it slightly, because I'm worried that if his form wanes, then the fans will get on his back. But are Everton fans, first off, right to have a little moan and complain that he hasn't signed his contract, that he hasn't committed his future to the club?
Well, we don't really know what the conversations are going on behind closed doors, what he's been offered and things like that. I think it's understandable why at this stage in his career he might be mulling over different things, trying to work out, taking a bit of time as to what's going to happen next. I think there's probably also a little bit of trying to work out where he fits in Everton's long-term plans as well as they reconstruct their attacking unit. So, I mean, not being privy to those discussions is difficult. And also, because... And why I say that is because, look, I think that we know Everton's financial position, both general financial and also from a PSR perspective, is a tricky one. So I can imagine that they would find it very difficult to categorically say to him that they wouldn't accept a bid for him if something came in. So I imagine you're in a situation where actually we might look at it and say Calvert-Lewin hasn't signed a new deal, therefore he's the one that's being cagey. I can kind of see how all parties are probably being cagey in this situation. It's not really helping any of them.
No.
So, like, it's a kind of a bit of a standoff, which, we spoke about this in a previous podcast. It's a standoff that I don't think is anybody's fault. I know quite often when you get to last year of contracts for an important player, you can look at the club and say, why didn't they ward this off a year or 18 months ago? Everton couldn't really offer Dominic Calvert-Lewin a big contract last summer because of his injury issues. So, like, this is just something that was just unavoidable, I think. Look, there is uncertainty, but again, like I said previously, in relation to the situation on him, the dial only really moves if somebody comes in for him. Like, where he sits on his contract or whether Everton want to sell him or not, it's all largely irrelevant unless somebody actually wants to come in and make an offer for him. And we've just seen, West Ham are one of the sides that are interested in him. Just look like they're on the brink of signing Nicholas Fulkrug. So there's their big summer signing. All of a sudden, you're starting to looking at, well, who else might be after him? Newcastle, we know, are interested. Callum Wilson's injured. They've got a problem there. They come to the table once. They might come back. So there's one option. I wouldn't be surprised if Manchester United had a little look at him. I mean, I'd be interested to see what the relationship between the two clubs is after the Brantford problems. But Manchester United, Højlund's just picked up an injury. They're reluctant to place too much responsibility on Xerxes hitting the ground immediately. One of the problems that they've had on their tour of America from pre-season is just not having a natural striker that could just stay up front and just do the obvious focal point stuff that Dominic Calvert-Lewin does. So I wouldn't be that surprised if, bearing in mind they're probably having spent so much money on Højlund and Xerxes in recent seasons, I wouldn't be surprised if they thought, we've seen them put a cheeky bid in for Brantford. Maybe they might put a cheeky bid in for Dominic Calvert-Lewin and just say, £15 million or something, and maybe he could just answer their problems for a little bit. I'm sure they'd give him a decent wage and he'd be happy with that. And I imagine that Calvert-Lewin would quite like to live in London, but I think he'd probably be open to alternative suggestions if the right deal came along. So I don't really place blame on anybody in this fault. Like, I think it's just an awkward situation that nobody is to blame for. And the uncertainty is frustrating. It's a priority for Everton to get sorted. But again, Everton can't say, you were happy to sell him if no one's willing to come in for him. But it might take something like Everton go and say, you know what, we'll lower it to 50. Whatever the price tag is for him, we'll lower it, and then hopefully that'll draw some sides in. But if they're doing that, it's then difficult to be critical of Calvert-Lewin for not signing a new deal when he's got a club that's considering how it can market him. So, I think it's a complicated situation. I don't know what the answer is. I know that Everton are better when Dominic Calvert-Lewin is in that side. I don't think Everton will be able to replace Dominic Calvert-Lewin effectively. I do think they've got a little bit more backup in terms of attacking options this season. Obviously, Chimiti, when he does come back, is still a better player than he was. Better will be growing on what he did last season. There's still obviously big question marks over him. But, hopefully he can progress. And what he did do when he came in last season was two things, which are both important, even if they're not scoring goals. He allowed Everton to set up in the same way that they would play when Dominic Calvert-Lewin was there. So Calvert-Lewin's absence didn't lead to a massive change in shape. And he did cause problems for defences. How much of it was on purpose, I'm not sure. But defences didn't know how to deal with him. And I feel that if we end up in a situation where he's leading the line, with the additions of Lindstrom and the addition of Ndai, there might be players that are far more capable of exploiting the madness that's created by Beto on the pitch than we had last season. There might be more players that are capable of putting the ball into the back of the net from 20 yards if it drops there, or from playing a cute pass to one of their other attacking midfielders because, Beto's created some space somewhere else. So
just sticking with you, Joe, and Gav will come on because my next point kind of leads on to this. A contract has been offered to Dominic Calvert-Lewin. It hasn't been accepted. I assume it hasn't been rejected. I know you're not privy to these conversations, but are the club still in open dialogue? Do you know? Or
well, he's still playing for him. He's still turning up at training. So clearly, and
he's obviously
speaking to him.
He's contracted to do that. What I'm saying is it just Calvert-Lewin keeping his options open? Is that literally what it is?
Yeah, I think so. But then, like I say, there are plenty of reasons why that might be an astute thing for him to be doing right now. So,
but is there any? Again, I know you're not privy, but is there any way the club would go back with a different contract, different wages?
I think they probably have to assess where they are at the end of the transfer window and then see where they are. Because at the moment, going back and perhaps offering him more to see if that would tempt him, probably be a difficult thing for them to do when they're not quite sure what the best thing for them to be. There is no doubt that for all the business that's been done and as savvy as it might have been, I think me and Gav, I don't want to speak for you, Gav, but I think we're probably in agreement that in terms of when we get to PSR for the back end of the 12 months we're now in, Everton still have a lot of work to do.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So and this is why I think I'm very, very reluctant for this to become a witch hunt against Dominic Calvert-Lewin for not signing a new deal. And I'm very keen for people to realise that often these things are a lot muddier than we've seen, and it might be, reasonable. It might be reasonable for players to take time to consider their options. There is no doubt that an incoming transfer fee would be helpful for Everton, and for the size of what they get, even if it was a cut price deal for Calvert-Lewin, and on the terms they get with it, and the PSR effect it would have, bearing in mind that he's been at the club for so long, it would effectively all be positive, wouldn't it, on the books? So that's why I think the standoff is probably continuing. I think we're probably at an impasse that neither side is keen to make the first move to break, and that's probably where we are at the minute. Where I do think there might be an interesting sideshow would be is if someone was to come in for Beto. There are new reports that this time it's Atalanta that are interested in Beto because Scamacca's had an injury. I don't have a foothold in Italian football, so I don't know if that's true. And if I'm being perfectly honest, obviously we see a lot of rumours come out of the Italian football media, and the vast majority of them tend to go absolutely nowhere. So I'd be wary about reading too much into it. But Beto is somebody that has a profile in Italy from his time in Udinese, may have some interest in there. I would be interested to see what would happen if someone was to put a concrete offer in for Beto. Who is a player who I think has potential, but I think is still raw. And if you were to offer Everton a route out where everybody saves face, and perhaps Everton bring in a transfer fee that is useful for the PSR aspect and might also help them create the freedom for them to maybe look for another striker who either plays foil to Calvert-Lewin or could replace him, then that might be a useful solution for everyone. But one thing I don't think Everton are going to do is, whilst they might be having conversations over strikers right now, as they try and work out what's going to happen if there's interest in Beto, whilst there's uncertainty over Dominic Calvert-Lewin, whilst Chimiti's injured, at the minute they've got Dominic Calvert-Lewin, Beto, Chimiti, Neil Maupay on their books, plus Iliman and Dyche just signed, who's obviously kind of attacking, and that's a permanent deal. I think it'd be very difficult for Everton to start going after strikers now without the understanding, even if it's behind closed doors understanding, that at least one of those players is going. They don't need another striker at the moment. They can't afford to overload in that position, like they can't afford to overload in any position. So I think that any conversation that they'd be having over a striker now, when you see reports of them being linked to someone like Tammy Abraham or something like that, or Bouladia, they couldn't. If there is any truth in it, it can only be provisional on the basis that other deals happen elsewhere. Yeah. Look, I think they'd be willing to. I think if someone came in for Maupay, I think they'd be more than willing to listen. Just like they would if someone came in for Holgate. And I think they'd probably lend an ear to people coming in for Calvert-Lewin and Beto, depending on what the circumstances were. So there may well, the uncertainty around Calvert-Lewin isn't helpful, and there may well be movement late in the summer transfer window around the strikers, and that isn't ideal. But I think it's difficult to kind of reach too much of a judgment on where they're at and whose fault that uncertainty is at the minute. Because, as I say, I think, unfortunately, it's a bit of a perfect storm and it's been a bit unavoidable.
Okay, final point on this, Gav, before we move over to some quick-fire questions, because we are coming up to the hour now, so we'll need to finish off in the next 5 or so minutes. Contract situations, running stuff down like this, it just brings a lot of baggage, doesn't it, for me, and...
I mean, it clearly does. I feel like you're trying to drive it in against Calvert.
No,
well, I don't think we need to create more of a situation than there is, because I say.
But a situation will be created off its own. But it doesn't need me to do it. It'll be created if his form's not good and he's not scoring goals. I think that's inevitable.
That's fair comments, isn't it?
That's inevitable. I'm just here
it's not
asking
the same.
questions.
It's a bit like Lescott, isn't it? In 2000, not the same. It's because Lescott was always going to go to Manchester City, but if Calvert-Lewin starts the season off the pace, misses a few chances,
that's my point. Yeah, I think that's exactly my point.
But at the same time, to defend Calvert-Lewin as a contractor's employee, it's well within his rights to look for options. Yeah. It's funny, isn't it, that when a club announces a player's contract's not going to be renewed, nobody bats an eyelid, because that's their privilege as the employer. When an employee exercises the same options, like I'm going to look for, if my contract finishes, look for options elsewhere. Everybody gets on the back. They're two completely different scenarios. And I think we're unfair generally on players who, they've got a contract, and they're fully obliged to look at other options if they see fit or play to the end of their contract. So I've not got a problem with what Calvert-Lewin's doing. I suspect the issue, as we said several times, is what he thinks he's worth in terms of his wage and what other clubs feel he's worth, including Everton. There's probably a gap there, and the gap being that he probably wants more than what other clubs are prepared to, including Everton, prepared to offer. And I get where clubs are coming from, I've said before. But I do get what you're saying, is one of the things within this, and it's something that needs to be avoided for many different reasons. Starts of the season, Calvert-Lewin's a bit off the pace, and then you get, and we're talking about, a bit of a new start for the team, but that pushing on a little bit and being positive about stuff, that'll be something we can do without. I think the best case scenario is really Calvert-Lewin goes and everybody's happy and we get a decent fee and we can look possibly to reinvest it and solve some PSR.
I'm going to disagree with you. I think the best case scenario is that he signs a new contract and stays for another three years.
But do you think so?
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's fair.
That's fine. I think
from PSR purposes, the best thing is he goes.
But then are we going to be able to replace him?
Well, that's what that's that's an issue that Joe's spoken about, isn't it? Really depends what options there are. But I think for PSR purposes, the best is that he goes. But signing a 3-year, but then again, you say sign a 3-year deal. Sign a 3-year deal on what?
Money-wise.
If it's always saying, okay, be good. But what happens if it's quite a high salary that you would think, well, that's a bit of a risk? And then what happens is then you get all the other players in the squad saying, see, he's on that money, I want to be on that. And so that can have a destabilising effect. So I think Calvert-Lewin's not got a problem with a 3-year contract, but it's got to be a 3-year contract that is reasonable and reflects the fact that he scored 15, 16 goals in 3 years and has been missing for half the games.
No, that's fine. I think some people might be thinking I'm picking on Calvert-Lewin. I'm not. And it's the complete
it's the
opposite.
The context is that completely.
I am just worried from the stuff I see on social media and speaking to Blues, in the street or whatever, that there's definitely a worry that if his form drops off, he score goals, and let's face it, he has not been prolific over the past couple of seasons, that people will get frustrated. His form will dip. I mean, we saw it after Coventry. He didn't play well. There was a few moans, but I'm absolutely delighted that he scored against Preston, back on the score sheet. Hopefully he's going to be in the first team for the Brighton game. First team, he's going to be in the starting 11 for the Brighton game, and he kicks on. So yeah.
I think the other thing that we haven't mentioned, and the reason we haven't mentioned it because there isn't a lot to say at the minute on it, but the other thing that's just lurking in the background for all these decisions is the takeover, and the fact that there isn't one in line at the minute, and that will colour the club's activities for the final weeks of the transfer window. I mean, the club is confident that in the short term things are good. But obviously we know that when you get to the back end of August, short term, you can't look in the short term anymore. You have to look for the next 4 months or so until January, which is your next opportunity to start bringing in money for players and things like that. So Everton again trapped a little bit in this, in the sense that a useful transfer fee for someone like Dominic Calvert-Lewin might be valuable to them if it could come in, but similarly, offering a new deal, if big terms or improved terms, whatever, again, who's going to be paying those wages? So that's another thing where there is a bit of uncertainty, and I don't know the ins and outs of. I don't know the specifics of Everton's finances right now, and I don't know the specifics of Mashiri's finances right now. But I think that come the back end of August, if they're sensible, you think that they would have to be having some sort of eye on the following 9 months or so and how things are going to do. And, if they felt that there was any need for, to tighten up some of their finances, then sales would be useful. So it's going to be, I think that is a situation to watch. I don't think it's something that we're necessarily dealing with right now, but it might just be something to watch. And
go on, sorry, you want to finish? Go on.
No, go on.
I was just going to say, I feel like you do a bit more of the opinion to sell Calvert-Lewin if an offer comes in, and I don't disagree with that, but we've just spent probably the first part of the podcast talking about how more attacking and how more creative we're going to be, and these players should be able to help Calvert-Lewin, obviously, with these goals, should be able to assist, and I'd just be very disappointed if we get all these players in. But we've already got some of these, creative players in, and then we just go and sell a striker who would be crying out for assists.
Yeah, I want Calvert-Lewin to stay.
Yeah.
I don't think the club could turn down decent money for him, which we've already been into that. I think that the dream scenario would be that the summer transfer window ends the same way it started, and that is with Everton being able to make big financial progress through deals for players it's happy to let go. We saw that. We've seen that already. The club has brought in deals to the value of about £75 million from Lewis Dobbin, who was promising and we liked, and we all loved that moment against Chelsea. But let's be honest, was probably not going to have a big impact this season. Through Ben Godfrey, who got relied on at right back last season, but wasn't a right back. It was difficult to see him being anything other than a squad player, played out of position again this season. And Amadou Onana, who, whilst we say, there's clearly a bit of a gap in centre midfield now, and again, being a big divisive issue on podcasts and amongst the fan base last season, I think was a very good player, but was probably unlikely to be able to be used to the best of his abilities in this Dyche setup, even if it is going to start changing a little bit. He's going to try to get the ball on the floor a little bit more. So, if all of a sudden they could find clubs that are willing to come in for Mopé and Holgate, and maybe if someone comes in for Beto and they can raise £25-30 million elsewhere, that takes the pressure off having to reach a negative decision on Dominic Calvert-Lewin. That's probably the ideal situation, isn't it? I think that's the dream. But I think that this is it. I think we just need to be prepared for the longer takeover continues with no obvious resolution. The more astute it might be just to be wary of those final weeks of the transfer window.
Okay, well, it got a little bit spicy towards the end there, didn't it? I like it. I'm sure we'll...
That's what podcasts are for.
No, exactly. And do you know what? 2 weeks till the season starts, but I'm sure Calvert-Lewin will definitely be on the agenda at some point over the next 2 weeks, or probably up until the end of the deadline, transfer deadline.
He's done on the agenda this time next year, whatever it is, the end of the season, when he's not signed a contract and goes on a free. I think that's the
if he scored 25 goals and powered Everton
there's an option where he starts the season like a house on fire, gets to January and somebody's not signed a contract, somebody thinks, oh, I tell you what, we'll take a punt here, or signs a contract and then somebody wants to buy him in January or
there's just not an easy solution to this.
Okay, some quick fire questions then, because we are running out of time.
Hopefully the first one's not about DCL, please.
Well, it is actually. I'll go with you on this one first, Gav. So Emma has asked, who will be the number one striker come next week?
Dyche, obviously.
Dominic
Calvert-Lewin. Yeah.
Emma has also said, Joe, please press Dyche on the issue more. In the press conferences, I assume.
Yeah, okay. That's a fair thing.
I don't think, Joe, you're getting the updates anyway, aren't you? Do you know what I mean? So you can only go off what the manager says. Tazul Islam has asked, anyone know what's going on with Dele Alli? If Everton are not interested in signing him, why did we renegotiate the deal with Spurs?
Yeah, well, I think they're interested on the right terms, and that is, one, the finances of the deal, but also on improving his fitness. And he's only just got to a position where he's kind of in and around proper training. So they can't really make a full assessment of him until they've had a long look at him, interacting with the other players and see where he's at and what he might be able to get to. So I think that the talks with Spurs were exploratory in case that situation came. I think there was a fear that they would play a big role in his rehabilitation and then all of a sudden he'd start to look good, and then another club that didn't have any baggage in terms of a deal with Spurs would come in and exploit all of Everton's hard work and pick up a good player who's talented, looks good again on a free. I think the talks with Spurs were basically a case of Everton trying to protect their position just in case they wanted to move for him. I think that Dyche likes him as a person. I think they've got quite a good rapport. He likes him as a player. I think there's a role that he could play in that Everton side. He feels like another option in that attacking midfield position that it looks like Dyche's looking to develop this season. But I think it will basically, it's just a watching brief on seeing how he looks as his fitness improves and whether or not they think there's still a player that they can access in there.
Okay, Dave Mack has asked, with Lindstrom, our European loan, and Harrison back on loan, we have one domestic loan a spot available. What does Joe think about the chances of utilising this? I
think they'll look to utilise it, and I think that Calvin Phillips is the obvious one. And like I say, I think that's probably more a case of needing City to come towards Everton on the mechanics of any deal. But I think that, having spoken to Dyche 3 times in the past week, I think any business will have to be savvy, unless there's outgoing business. I think it's clear that their preference is to look for players with Premier League experience if they can get them, and I think that personally centre midfield is the most obvious issue to try and boost from that. There is interest in Calvin Phillips. I think all roads lead to Calvin Phillips if Everton can get a deal over the line with City on that. That certainly isn't a given. So if somebody else was to become available, but I think they will look to use the domestic loan if they can.
Okay.
I think they'd be daft not to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's it then. We'll finish off. Any final remarks, Gav, before we go?
No, I think that's been a wide-ranging pod of positive stuff and some realism.
Yeah. Once we got the audio fixed.
Yeah, the first one was great, actually. My best bit on that.
Joe, any final remarks before
No, that's it for me. Thanks for everybody for following our coverage.
Yeah, absolutely. And also give us a like if you haven't already, and also subscribe to the Royal Blue YouTube channel. I'm trying to think when we are going to be back. I know I'm going to try and sort out Chris Beasley's interview with Alan Irvine for this week. So keep an eye out for that one, because that is one that is probably overdue to be published. But we do have Roma coming up as well, don't we, on Saturday? So I'm sure we'll do some sort of a preview pod for that one. Looking forward to getting back to Goodison Park. The final, last ever friendly at Goodison Park. Does that make sense? Did I say that right?
Might not be the last friendly. God knows what they'll do at the back end of next season as they kind of as part of all the festivities.
The final first pre-season friendly.
It'll be the final pre-season friendly at Goodison Park.
Yeah.
They got Motherwell there on Tuesday first, behind closed doors. That is.
Yeah.
I was down Goodison last week, and the pitch looks phenomenal.
It does. I've seen a picture of it. It looks really good.
I was up close speaking to some of the groundsmen actually, and they're obviously under a lot of pressure this year, but the pitch looks stunning. Okay, well, on that note, we will leave it there. Thank you for joining us on the live stream. As always, support is greatly appreciated. I've been Ian Croll, joined by Joe Thomas and Gav Buckland, and this has been the Royal Blue Podcast.